Okay, well, welcome to the next rendition of Build Your Writing Foundation workshops, our workshop series here with the ASC. Today you've joined the Paraphrasing workshop, and so we'll be talking about all things paraphrasing in the next 30 minutes or so. My name is Sharon Arazo, and I'm a workshop facilitator and tutor with the Academic Success Center. If you have any questions after this workshop, you're welcome to send me an email, and my email address is there on the screen. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that RRC Polytech campuses are located on the lands of Anishinaabe, Niniwak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. So for the next half an hour, we're going to focus on these four topics here. First of all, we're going to do a brief introduction to what is paraphrasing, and then I'd like to touch on what is paraphrasing in comparison to summarizing. That will be a brief topic there. We'll also look at paraphrasing and plagiarism, and then we're going to look at some steps that can help you when you're trying to paraphrase information for an assignment. So first of all, let's take a look at an introduction to paraphrasing, specifically what is paraphrasing. Before talking about, paraphrasing in itself, and very briefly stated, is basically rewriting or restating information from another source in your own words. So very simply put, that is what paraphrasing is. When we're paraphrasing in writing, our writing should reflect the same meaning of the original source without bias. So we're stating stating information in our own words, but we're not changing the meaning of the original source. Our paraphrase should be written in our own writing voice or our own writing style. And a paraphrase should also include a reference to the source. So the original source that we are paraphrasing, we must indicate where we have found this information from. As a side note, next week in our workshop, we will be doing a workshop on referencing and citing sources using the APA style. So you're welcome to attend our workshop next week for some details on that. What is the point and what is the goal of paraphrasing? Why do we paraphrase? Well, first of all, before I move into talking about academic paraphrasing in an academic context, I want to just mention that we paraphrase all the time, actually. It's not just an academic skill. It's definitely important in academics, but we do it outside of academia as well. We paraphrase in our personal lives and at work all the time. And I won't get any responses from the audience at this moment, but I'd like you to think about this question. Can you think of examples where you paraphrase on a day-to-day basis in your daily life? Potentially, if you're listening to a friend, you'll repeat back what you understood when they're telling you about a problem that they're having. So you're paraphrasing what you've understood them saying to you. Maybe you work in a restaurant as a server, and so when someone gives an order, you repeat back to the customer what it is they're wanting so that you don't accidentally bring them the wrong food. So you're paraphrasing what they've told you. We may also paraphrase when you're explaining something to someone and you're trying to simplify it and help them see the specific points for a specific purpose. So the idea here is we paraphrase all the time, but specifically we're also going to be talking today about paraphrasing in academic writing. I'm just going to adjust my screen for a moment. Sorry. Got a window that's opened up on me. There we go. We'll figure that out. So talking specifically about paraphrasing in academic writing, paraphrasing allows us to take chunks from a source, so bits of information from a source, and to simplify complex ideas or vocabulary to fit our audience and format. So we're doing some reading from original source, we take parts of that information and simplify complex ideas based on what our audience needs to know or based on what the format is that we're writing in. It also allows the writer to choose what chunks of information from a source will fit their needs of the writing task. What I choose to paraphrase may differ from a source depending on what it is I'm being asked to do, what the specific focus of my writing task is. as I say that, I do want to emphasize this fact that the writer cannot misrepresent the point of view of the original source. So while I may not paraphrase every single detail from an original source, what I choose to paraphrase, I want to ensure I am accurately representing when I am putting that information into my own words. So this is why it's important to paraphrase. This is why it's important to develop the skill of paraphrasing, because I'm sure you are going to be asked to do research papers or include information from outside sources within your own writing or your own assignments. And this will be an opportunity for you to simplify complex ideas or vocabulary, and also to integrate information from other sources into the purposes for your assignments. An example of what I mean by this. Let's say that we have two students, one from the business admin program and another from the social innovation and community development program. If both students, maybe in separate classes, have been asked to write a reflection about the results of the recent provincial election in Manitoba and support their ideas with research. So both students could read the same article from the CBC News about the election, but they may choose to paraphrase different pieces of information, different chunks of information. Perhaps the business admin student will be thinking more about how the election will impact business owners in Manitoba. So the student may choose to paraphrase information from the article about that specific topic for their reflection. On the other hand, the social innovation student may want to write more about how the election will affect supports for low-income families, and so the student may choose to paraphrase information from the article about that topic for their reflection. So taking the same article, these two students with different purposes in their writing may choose to focus on different bits of information, different chunks of information when they're paraphrasing. They don't necessarily have to paraphrase the article as a whole. So they paraphrase the information that's applicable to their task, their topic, and audience, while staying true to the intentions of the original author. Often when we talk about the word paraphrasing, we also think of summarizing. I just want to take a moment to differentiate, or maybe also to compare, say what we mean by paraphrasing and summarizing. So they are similar in some cases. So basically, for both paraphrasing and summarizing, writers must use their own words or their own voice to express information. So we're taking information from a different source, and we are expressing those ideas with our own words or our own voice to express that information. Last week, if you missed it, we did have a workshop on summarizing. And so we do have the recording uploaded onto our website. So if you go to the Build Your Writing Foundation workshop website, you will be able to locate the recording of that workshop. So you can get some more information there. So paraphrasing and summarizing are similar in some cases in the sense that we use our own words to express someone else's ideas, express external information, but they're also different. And the main difference between paraphrasing and summarizing is, one, summarizing requires the writer to identify and express the main idea of the whole source. So there, as I said earlier, we did have a workshop on that where we did some illustrations of how that can be done. Paraphrasing, on the other hand, allows the writer to choose the information from a source that's applicable to their writing task, their topic, and audience. So the main differences there then are summarizing the writer will identify the overall ideas and the very main supporting points from a source and express those in their own words. Paraphrasing, the writer may choose different chunks of information based on their needs for their writing, based on their task, their topic, and audience, and from there, write that information in their own words, using their own writing voice. Again, I want to remind us, we want to make sure as writers that we accurately represent the point of view of the original source. I want to move on now to talking about plagiarism when it comes to taking information from another source, because I know this is an important topic that I'm sure many of you have heard about, and maybe you've learned a little bit about what plagiarism is and how to avoid this. What I want to talk about is what can happen sometimes when we're trying to paraphrase if we don't write information in our own writing voice, in our own words. So just to give a general understanding here, Whenever we paraphrase or quote someone else's words or ideas, we need to give credit to the original author. And so for APA citation style, this would include both an in-text citation and a reference. And as I mentioned, next week we'll talk more about APA, so you're welcome to come to that workshop for more information on how to do in-text citations and references. If we don't give credit to the original author for their words or ideas, then we end up committing what's called plagiarism. So anytime I'm taking words directly from the source, that would be a quotation, or I'm paraphrasing or summarizing information, so I'm taking some ideas, putting it into my own words, but I'm using someone else's ideas. Anytime I'm doing that, anytime we do that, we must give credit. Who has given you this information? Who gave you these words? Who gave you this idea? Sometimes I've worked with students who have plagiarized without realizing it. They didn't intend to plagiarize, but they took information from a source. They made an attempt at writing it in their own words. However, it was still very close to the original text, and it was too close to the original text. So it still was considered improperly paraphrased. It was still considered plagiarized. Paraphrasing, well, can be challenging. So sometimes students rely on simply finding words with a similar meaning or synonyms. This is called synonym swapping, where you take a sentence from an original text, use that sentence in your own writing, but you just change a few keywords. So an attempt has been made to reword some of the information, but because that original sentence is still basically the same, it's basically the same structure, it's called synonym swapping, and this is a form of this is a form of plagiarism, whether it was intended or not. I want to show you what I mean in these next few slides. So here on the slide, I have a sample original text, and then I have a sample paraphrased text. I'm just going to read it out loud, so we're all in the same place. I'll read the original text out loud, and then I'm going to show you how synonym swapping has occurred in this sample. So the original text states, students frequently overuse direct quotations in taking notes, and as a result, they overuse quotations in the final research paper. Probably only about 10% of your final manuscript should appear as directly quoted matter. Therefore, you should strive to limit the amount of exact transcribing of source materials while taking notes. And that's from Lester, 1976, and they have a page number there. A sample paraphrase or an attempt at paraphrasing is noted here, and that reads, students often use quotes while note-taking. This means that they use too many quotations in their last paper. It is likely that simply approximately 10% of your last paper should be quotes. In conclusion, you should attempt to lessen the number of quotes while note-taking. So the author who wrote this paraphrased text has taken information from the above text, the original text, and attempted to write it in their own words. We're going to take a look sentence by sentence at what has gone on here. So the first sentence here, the original text reads, students frequently overuse direct quotations in taking notes, and the attempt at paraphrasing says, students often use quotes while note-taking. Now, they have changed the order of some of the information a little bit, but it still is quite similar to the original text. The overall sentence structure is very similar to the original text. I would say it's too similar, and so we want to avoid simply changing out a few words, but leaving the sentence as a whole the same. Moving on, it says, as a result, they overuse quotations in the final research paper. Paraphrase says, this means that they use too many quotations in their last paper. Now here, the author has actually created two sentences where there was one before, right? It was a longer sentence and they have created two, so that's a step in the right direction. However, it still is quite similar to the overall order of information. And also, if you look at the last part of that highlighted text, the final research paper has been paraphrased as their last research paper. So they've used the word final, looked for a synonym last, and inputted that into their paraphrase. I'm wondering how that sounds to you. It kind of changes the meaning of the sentence, and it also sounds rather awkward. So it's not a good word choice. It's not an appropriate word choice here. You've changed some of the meaning. Sometimes with synonyms, they may be a synonym and a thesaurus, but words have different layers to them. Words have different contexts where they're used appropriately. And so we want to ensure that we're using words, when we're using synonyms, we want to ensure that we're using words that accurately portray the meaning of the original text. The next sentence reads, probably only about 10% of your final manuscript should appear as directly quoted matter. And that's been paraphrased. It is likely that simply approximately 10% of your last paper should be quotes. We have pretty much, again, the same order of information here. It's probable, it's likely, 10%, 10%, final manuscript, last paper, quoted matter, quotes. So it's the same order of information, even though there's been some slight variation to the wording, but the overall sentence structure is very similar. Also note in the paraphrase, it says, it's likely that simply approximately 10%. So they've tried to use other words here, but it's become quite wordy, and that's making it difficult to really understand what this overall sentence is about. Lastly, in the purple text, in the purple highlight here, it says, therefore, you should strive to limit the amount of exact transcribing of source materials while taking notes. And that's been paraphrased as, in conclusion, you should attempt to lessen the number of quotes while note-taking. Again, similar idea here. We're following the basic same order of information. While taking notes has become while note-taking. So there's a very minor attempt at putting this into one's own words. Actually, there's even a spelling mistake. There was lesson should be spelled differently. So the whole other word has been chosen. But it's just overall too similar to the original text. So what can we learn from this example of synonym swapping? A few things. One, synonym swapping can result in inaccurate and strange vocabulary choices that just don't make sense. Two, plagiarism can happen because the meaning of the original text may have changed. So more specifically, I should say this, instead of actually paraphrasing, we could be changing the meaning of the original text. And finally, this can result in plagiarism because the writer has not adequately paraphrased. A paraphrase, to remind us, needs to be in the writer's own voice. So that means using your own vocabulary and sentence structure. And in the example that we saw, although the vocabulary was simplified a little bit, the sentence structure was basically the same. So it's still too close to the original text. Now, how can we then paraphrase in such a way that will help us avoid that? Because the students I work with, I know that their intention is not to plagiarize. They do want to paraphrase, but sometimes it's difficult to know how to do that. What I want to do in the next few minutes that I have with you is go through 5 steps that we can take to help us paraphrase more effectively and help us avoid accidental plagiarism. So the 5 steps I'm going to suggest here are, first of all, read and identify the main idea of the text. Secondly, take notes. Third, walk away. 4, write. And 5, check for plagiarism. And I'm going to go through each of these in the next few slides here. So first of all, when paraphrasing, what we first of all need to do is read and identify the main idea of the text. Read the text more than one time. If we haven't read and understood what the original text was about, we're not going to be able to paraphrase it appropriately. We won't be able to summarize it easily, very well either, if that's the goal. So reading the original text, understanding what the original author or authors are intending to communicate is key in order to be able to paraphrase and or summarize appropriately. So as you're reading, some things to look for. What is the topic, the general topic, and what is the main idea? And there is a difference here, which I'll describe. The topic of a text would be the overarching idea, the big idea that an author is writing about. And you could potentially summarize this to yourself in 1 or 2 words. It will probably be about a general subject. When we can identify the topic that we're reading about and the topic that we're wanting to paraphrase, it will help us as the writers start to identify related vocabulary that we could be using when we're going to be writing our paraphrase. We also want to identify what the main idea of a specific text is. And this could be maybe a statement that an author makes about the topic and what the text is mostly about. So you could probably state this in a sentence. It will be more complete and more specific than the topic itself. So as you read a text, you'd want to identify the topic, you'd want to identify the main idea, and this probably will require reading a text more than one time. So when you're writing an assignment and you need to paraphrase something, please ensure you're giving yourself enough time to focus on this first step. Because if we don't do this step well, it will make things more difficult as we move on to the writing stage of our paraphrase. The next thing I would suggest when paraphrasing, once you've read it and you've understood what the main idea is to take notes. When you're taking notes, please avoid using full sentences. I would recommend using point form notes at this stage and try to just write down key words or key phrases that you feel are important. Use symbols wherever you can to replace words. Obviously, make sure you use symbols that you will remember when you come back to your notes, but trying to minimize the amount of words on your page will be helpful, so long as you capture the key ideas that you are going to want to paraphrase. So focus on key words. Here would be a time to use synonyms wherever possible, again, ensuring that they are accurate representations of the words from the original text. If you don't know words as you're reading or as you're trying to take your notes, look those words up to ensure you understand what the original authors are saying. If you're paraphrasing a longer text, depending on your purpose for writing and who your audience is, you might not need to include all of the details in the text, and I alluded to this earlier. So think critically about what you're going to want in your paraphrase and include that information in your notes. If you use this stage or this step in paraphrasing to really think critically about the information, what do you need to include? What are other ways that you could say this? How can you capture those key words? If you do the critical thinking here, it's going to help you it's going to help you a lot as you move on to the writing stage of your paraphrase. Often I work with students who have had to paraphrase an article, and when they come to me, they have a lot of information highlighted on the page, which is fine. It's helping them identify what the main ideas are, or what the key points are that they want to paraphrase. I would still recommend moving to taking notes after doing some of that highlighting. And the reason is, if you're looking at those full, complete sentences in the original text, it can be much more difficult to think of your own way to say those key ideas, to think of your own sentences to express those key ideas. So adding in this point form note-taking stage will help distance you a little bit from the original text, and will help you then be able to create your own sentences. Because if you think about it, you're looking at a page of point form notes, you are now forced to create your own sentences. And so you've already forced yourself to move on to moving away from the original sentence structure that you saw in the text that you were reading. So first step is reading carefully, identifying the main idea. Second step would be taking point form notes. So just to look at the text that we saw earlier, here's the original text that we had gone through line by line. If I were to identify the topic here, it would be basically the students' use of quotes, and the main idea I would potentially state as students should avoid including direct quotations in their notes so they don't overuse quotes in their paper. If I were to take notes about the key points from this paraphrase or from this text that I will want to paraphrase, it may be something like this: students, direct quotes and notes. I'm using X as direct. Arrow meaning leading to many quotes in the paper. Quotes, max 10% of papers. And then my source. We never want to forget the source that we're going to have to include in an in-text citation. As a side note, it does mention here quotes should be maximum 10% of papers. I would double check that with your instructor. This is a source. This is someone else's idea from 1976. I imagine your instructors will have a different opinion on what would be an appropriate level, or what would be an appropriate amount of direct quotations in your assignments. So always double check with your instructor on their expectations. After taking notes, you've done the careful reading, you've taken notes, then I would walk away. And what I mean by that is give your brain a rest. It can be very challenging to paraphrase effectively when the original text is fresh in your mind. You've been reading it carefully, you've been analyzing the text, deciding what those key ideas are. So you want to give a bit of space to your brain so that when you come back to your notes later, you're going to be looking at it with a fresh set of eyes, and hopefully the original text won't still be in your mind, in your thoughts. So maybe you want to actually get up and make a dinner or go for a walk. Maybe you just move to a different type of assignment. Or maybe you come back to it the next day, however it works with your time management needs there. But giving your mind some sort of break will be very helpful to help you not accidentally write a paraphrase that is too close to the original text. After you've given yourself a bit of a break, then it's time to write your paraphrase. And I would start by stating the main idea, which you've noted down, and then add details. And I would only rely on your notes at this stage. Don't even look at the original text at this point. You'll come back to that later to compare your paraphrase, but in the writing stage, if you've done good notes, then only rely on your notes to help you write your own paraphrase. Again, we want to distance ourselves from the original sentences so that we don't accidentally copy the original sentences too closely. So the notes I have there in that pinkish box there, potentially a paraphrase from those notes might be: students should avoid using quotes in their notes because this results in too many quotes in their papers. Quotes should only make up 10% of a paper. And then I have the in-text citation. After I've written my paraphrase, there's a chance I maybe accidentally plagiarize still. So I still want to go back and review my paraphrase, compare my paraphrase to the original text. So some things I may want to look for are 3 or more words that are in the same order or form. I want to double check my sentence structure. Are the sentences organized in basically the same way as the original text? If so, then I'll want to do some rewriting of my paraphrase. Or maybe is my information listed in exactly the same order as the original text? So if I know any of those 3 things, that would signal to me that I should double check my own paraphrase and maybe make a few changes. Also, I want to make sure that my paraphrase text is keeping the same meaning as the original text. So there I have my original text and I have the new paraphrase, and I've kind of checked off some points here. So we've avoided using 3 words in the same order and form. Sentence structures are sufficiently different. In this case, the information is in a similar order, but I haven't included the same level of detail, so it can still work in this case. We've maintained the original meaning. The paraphrase text is simpler and more concise, and I do have a citation at the end of my paraphrase. So those are 5 steps which can be very helpful when paraphrasing. If this is a new skill for you or a skill that you're wanting to develop, I would definitely recommend using those 5 steps as you are paraphrasing information for your different assignments. If you feel quite confident in this skill, some people, as they develop the skill, they can sometimes do this in their minds as opposed to writing down those point form notes. Sometimes, though, you may still come across a text that is quite complex, and taking down those actual written notes can still be a really great tool to help ensure that you are paraphrasing that text appropriately. So just in summary then, I want to note that paraphrasing is an essential writing skill. And it also includes a lot of essential reading skills as well. When we're paraphrasing, we want to write in our own voice, using our own vocabulary, still staying true to the original meaning. And most of the time, we'll find that our paraphrase text will be simpler and more concise. Paraphrasing and summarizing have different purposes, and paraphrasing will allow the writer, to choose information that is relevant to their task, topic, and audience. When we're paraphrasing, we want to ensure we're avoiding simply synonym swapping. And to help us do that, we can use these 5 steps to help ensure we're paraphrasing appropriately. So reading and identifying the main idea, taking notes, walking away, writing, and then going back and checking for plagiarism. So thank you for joining me today for this workshop. If you have any further questions, you're welcome to contact me directly or come see us in the library. Next week, we will wrap up this Writing Foundation series, talking about APA citations and formatting. If you missed any of the previous workshop topics, I mentioned summarizing, but we've also had paragraph structure, reflective writing, claimant evidence, and emails. You're welcome to come to our website and you can find recordings of all of those. Thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.